So the guy who I was really, really drawn to in the whole Hillsong group was Reuben Morgan, one of their main songwriters. I just loved him. And so one day I was online and I'd heard about Hillsong College. And so I went online and I read a little bit about it. And so I wrote my parents. I was like, what do y'all think about, me going to Australia and doing, they have a Bible college and then you pick a stream. So everyone does kind of like the core Bible college stuff. And then you pick a stream, whether that's youth ministry, kids ministry, worship ministry. So yeah, my parents decided, cool, let's do it. So I packed up my bags and flew halfway across the world and I went to Australia. And
it's 2003 now.
This is 2003. I was there in 2003 and I did their worship stream. And man, you want to talk about now. So I've gone from a church of thousands of black people to a church of 300 white people to now a church of thousands of white people who worship more like the African people. Yes. I mean, just incredible praise and worship, but still a very different church culture, very different worship culture.
What are some of the things you'd say would be different?
I think for me, one of the biggest differences was the scale of a lot of what they do. It's like they would do things that you dream about doing. Like for example, there was when I was there for Easter, and of course I'm in the worship stream, so we're basically we're the workforce, we're the worker bees who just whatever needs to be done we do. And so that year for Easter, I was actually doing I was a vocal major, and then I changed my minor 3 times because I just wanted to get as much experience as I could. So one of my minors was in stage and set design. And so the woman I was working under at the time, I mean, this woman was just brilliant, artistic, just excellent when it comes to stage and all this kind of stuff. So we go into school or work really one day, and they've got like this piece of material. I mean, how can I describe it to you? Half a football field. Whoa. It's like laying on the ground, and it's in one of they had a huge like hanger for their stage stuff. So it's on the ground, and there are thousands. When I say thousands, I mean thousands of white candles, thousands of them. And she's like drawn this sketch on this piece of white material. I'm totally giving someone great ideas to use in their church services, by the way. And so she's drawn the sketch, and then she gives us these candles, and she says on the segments that she's written on these little segments, here, here, here. She's written the word here, here, here. She's like, wherever you see the word here, take the candle like a crayon and just fill in that section with the white candle. So it's just, you're basically spreading wax all over this material. So this took us, maybe we were about 60 of us, if I can remember the details. We were a bunch of us, and then we had to color in this thing. And then, that's all we were told to do. So that Sunday was Easter Sunday. And so we go to church, and Hillsong at the main campus at that time, their backstage was huge pieces of material that you use for screens, like that kind of material. And so that particular Sunday when we go in, it's now this material we'd been using that's more like a cotton. And so it's been stretched side to side. So it's just this background of the stage is just white. And so we're all called backstage. And, oh, I forgot to mention, there are 3 of these, three of these white things. We had to do 3 pieces of material. So we go in, there's 1 piece of material has been stretched, and we go backstage, and she starts explaining to us, we have got these big buckets of watered down black paint. And then she says they did the song, Oh, the Wonderful Cross. And as they're singing the song in church live during worship, all of us students are behind the black material with we've got ladders. We've all been given a section, and you're told 1, 2, 3, go, and you get the black thing and you just start painting. And wherever we had colored the wax, the paint didn't seep through. And wherever there wasn't wax, the paint would come through. So on the front now, you're just worshiping and singing about the wonderful cross, and all of a sudden you just see black, shoo, 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 everywhere. Black is just going everywhere. And then as they're worshiping, the face of Jesus is what had been drawn on this thing. I mean, I was just there like, that is just so cool.
I want to get saved.
Yes, it was so cool. And then they took that one down and set up the second one for second service, and then the third one for third service. So yeah, it was just on a massive scale. And I'm so grateful because the church I've been involved in for forever, my church, I mean, our leaders and our pastors had just put us at this level of excellence that it was not hard at all for me to integrate with that level of excellence at Hillsong. It was just on such a grander scale. So they would, I was at Hillsong conference. I was there for the Hope album recording. Like if you pause, there's a few places in the DVD. If you pause, you'll see my face. I had black hair. Yeah. In fact, I always laugh. I was telling my husband about that album. So I went in January, and then a friend of mine called Mushiri from NLC went in May. He was a member of our church.
And now does like this.
Yeah, he's
sounds.
Yeah, he's head of sound there.
At Hillsong.
Yes, at Hillsong. Yeah. So I went in January. He came in May, and he was like one of like 3 black students in this whole student fraternity. So he stands out immediately. Everyone knows him, loves him. And then he did the sound and tech stream, which there were like, of course, everyone who goes to Hillsong is going because of Darlene Check. So we're like 6,000 worship stream students. And then there's like 8 tech stream students, one of being Moosh. So Moosh, the head of the sound department, meets the day he comes for orientation. I'm showing him around. I'm trying to be like, let me show you Moosh. Let me get you settled. And it just so happens that Dave Watson, who's the head of sound, is in the sanctuary at that time. And I'm like, oh, Mr. Dave, this is Mushiri. Actually, he's come to do sound. This is the head of sound. I'm still like member number 400 of the choir, who nobody knows who I am. And from day one, Moosh gets connected to the big dog himself. And it's like, man, in fact, my tour kind of ended. The guy's like, Moosh, well, let me come show you guys something. I'm like, and me? Like, guys? It actually was very humbling because, in NLC, I'm the pastor's daughter. Everybody knows me. And I'm the daughter of Don Matheny. So even outside of, my church, people in the church world know me. People knew my grandfather. They know my dad. So I go from being known and the only one of the very few white girls. Now I'm in a sea of white girls. No one knows who my dad is. And then Moosh shows up and is like, who's this black guy? And it's like, everyone's like, oh, Moosh. And I'm like, oh, wait a second. It was so good for me. I mean, I stayed on the back row of the choir. Like, I'm here, like, you guys have written songs, like, I'm a worship leader, please. You're an alto, just and then even where I stood on Sundays, where the camera goes, they had built an extent of the stage. Literally, it's like the camera goes here, and I'm here. Like, I never even got onto the screen during church. And so, during the Hope album recording, I was so excited because we all have to buy these shirts. We all look exactly the same. There are 700 people in the choir during the Hope album recording. And I am just on the side in a sea of people. And I'm like, oh my goodness, no one is ever going to see me. And so the day before, we did the live recording over 3 nights. The day before recording, one of the set directors comes and they move me. And they're like, Rebekah, we want to move you from here. And they move me right on the actual stage. There's 2 tiny little choirs of like 12 people on each side. And I moved there. Joel Houston is so close, I could have tapped him on his shoulder. And most of the women who went to Hillsong at this time went because the Lord had spoken to them that they were going to marry Joel Houston. And so he's like the hot number at the time. And I'm like so close to him. And honestly, in my heart, I'm feeling like God has seen my faithfulness in the back row of the choir, never being on the camera. Like, now is my time to shine. If you look at the cover of the Hope album recording, the girl who replaced me in the sea, she's on the cover. I only get onto the album one time, and it's even in a faded shot. It's like, as the shot's fading, it's like, there I am, and then I'm gone. Hey, see, the Lord humbled me that year big time.
I always think about people who want to be worship ministers. Why is humility important?
Oh, humility is key. Pride is what set up the first worship leader ever for his biggest downfall. And I think a lot of that year for me was humbling. I was a vocal major, so I had a vocal teacher, and she was really mean. Like, I'm not gonna lie. She was her style of teaching was to be, I would say, demeaning. And so I would sing and she'd be like, oh, Bix, you sound like a cow in heat. Oh, Bix, if you were leading worship, I'd walk right out of the room. Like, that's how she would talk. And
First of all, that's a really good Australian
thank
accent.
you.
I was like, damn, that's good.
I lived there for quite some time. Yeah, so she was difficult, but it made something in me be like, I'll show you. I'll do it. I'm gonna work hard. And I feel like a lot of my musical journey has been stubbornness. It's been me saying, I am going to be good at this, because it really isn't natural. I'm not naturally musical. I have a great love and desire, but it's not something I'm like, I just open my mouth and it sounds like angels. Me, I'm like pitchy and I've got a lot of issues. So she really, she pushed me. In fact, my first performance major, like you have to perform and you get graded in your performance. You're in front of the student body. So my first performance major was a vocal performance. The highest grade you can get is 50. I got like a 20 something. I mean, I didn't fail, but it wasn't good. And so my second performance major was actually dance, because I did a dance internship because I knew I might perhaps one day be over dancers. And I don't in any way think of myself as a dancer, but I was like, this might be a cool experience to just see what it feels like to be on the dance team. And so I was on a dance team for 4 or 5 months, and I was awful. And so my performance major, they told us that the tall people were going to stand in the back row, but there were some short people in that back row. So it was like, I think it's the more challenged of us who are put on the back row. And then there's a moment where the back row, it's like our time to shine, where the back row moves to the front row. We had like 30 seconds to dance. And so I go, and first of all, we had to buy these ridiculous tutus, literally. Richard, I was in a tutu. And who's sitting on the front row watching the students? Joel Houston. He's sitting right there with, Marty Sampson and all the cool people. And I'm in this tutu and I'm doing this dance. Oh my gosh. And so the back row moves to the front row, and I'm like, this is it. This is my moment. I better own it. I mean, I'm never going to do this again, so I might as well make it good. And so I'm giving it all I've got. And there's a movement where we had to like slide across the floor like this. And so I give it everything, and there's a cable on the floor, and I trip. And not only do I go down, but I take this other girl down with me.
Whoa.
And so I'm on the floor, and all the other girls around me, I think there was like 2 dudes in this dance. All the other girls around me, they keep going like, this is for a grade. We are not failing because of you, Rebekah. Like, they're still doing their moves. And I'm there like, what does this mean? Have I failed? Like, so I just stand up, I give a bow, and I walk off the stage. And Joel Houston stands up and he starts clapping for me and cheering. I was like, so that was my second performance major. My third performance major was a vocal major, a vocal performance. And out of the 50, my teacher, who had spent all year telling me I'm not that good of a singer and really challenging me, I did a jazz piece for my final performance major. And she was on the panel, and she's never given a super high, she's never given a 50 ever. Like, that's a perfect score. She's never given above a 45 in her many years of doing this. She's never given above a 45. So she gave me a 48 for my final performance.
There's someone who was like...
Yes, who told me I sound like a dying cow when I sing. So that was very cool. But a lot of the year was very stretching for me. There was a time, the cool things that happened when I was in Australia. So there were 700 of us who were in the choir for the Hope album, but they only used 30 people to do the actual overdubs. Those 700 people were for the video. They're not for the audio.
Yeah.
So again, it's just like, I didn't even realize how much I'm learning just by this experience. So I was one of the 30 who was selected to be the team that did the overdubs. So that was very cool.
And let me ask, that's a good point that you brought up. Is this the first time that you're entering a studio, or had you entered the studio even before? Had you recorded anything on CD, tape, vinyl, whatever it may be?
I hadn't, because the first time I ever went into a little studio was actually in Australia. A friend of mine had Fruity Loops on her laptop. And so we just thought, again, we just really think we're big deals because we're making like these beats and recording on this terrible quality microphone on this tiny little laptop. So that was actually my first time in a little studio. And then in Australia, although the studio that we never went to studio, we did it in the sanctuary, but we had now like for reals mics and everyone had earphones. And I mean, now they're being serious about the overdubs for the choir. So that was a cool experience. And then right at the end of my year, Darlene Check was doing a fundraiser for, I think it was Compassion. Darlene Check and Delirious were doing a fundraiser. And so out of the entire student body, they selected 3 singers to be Darlene's BVs. And I was one of them.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that was my only cool thing when I was at Hillsong.
And at this time, you're not thinking Hillsong you're still, I'm coming back to Kenya.
Oh, yeah.
In your head, you're not thinking,
oh, for sure.
But this big stage is where I want to be.
You know what? I think for me, it was this big stage is what I want to create. This big stage is what I want to build.
Nice.
It's not, it would have been easy to stay and
work your way up.
Yeah. And enjoy, because these people have like endless budget. Like, you just think of an idea, it can be done. Like it can. In fact, when I was on the deco team, they changed the deco. Whatever deco changes on stage, it changes everywhere, in the bathrooms, in the bookstores, in the coffee shops. Like, there's a theme everywhere. So we're the teams who are going, changing the flowers in the bathrooms, changing the color scheme, in the bookshops and everything. So Pastor Bobby was very passionate about, when you walk into this house, this is God's house. We are the temple, yes, but this church is God's house. And when I come into your house is going to tell me a lot about you as a person. And she was very passionate about, this house needs to tell people about God. So they were big time serious about, and I loved it. And it's again, like now at NLC, I do all of our stage and sets, and I love it. And
stuff that you learned from, you're able to apply a lot of that stuff.
A lot of it. So it was a very humbling year. It was a lot of year of doing the grunt work. When we did the conference, we were the workforce. I mean, you're up at 2:00, literally 3 a.m. You work until, and they warn you weeks up to conference. Like, this week you're going to die, and then we'll resurrect you, and then you're going to die again. Like, just be ready.
Yeah.
So,
but I like that, because it shows the church isn't just, it's work.
Yeah. It's work, my friend. This is a job.
And everybody who enters church realizes just how much work church is. But it's also, let me say, an amazing training ground.
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask you, did this push you more and to the point where you're like, okay, now I think going back to Kenya, this in terms of, did it give you more focus into what you wanted to do? Before this, you had talked about there's a vision that you had seen.
Yeah.
Did you get now more direction and more steps on what you wanted?
Yeah, I think it gave me direction in the sense of, it really unlocked a lot of creativity. I had written a couple of songs by then, but I think being at Hillsong, I really got more revelation about songwriting and the ability.
Because you did a course on songwriting.
Yeah, I did. There were some classes on songwriting that were taught that really just kind of opened my eyes, like, maybe this is something I should actually try. I just think it was a year of inspiration, but more than anything, I think it was a year of, okay, let me put it to you this way. One of the things when the Lord put it in my heart when I was 17 years old, teach the nations to worship. This is what I think, Richie. I think a lot of people have strength and vision, but don't have a message. There's no authenticity. You haven't walked that path. And so, Alan and I laugh, like, people who get married and it's like 2 weeks after their marriage, it's like, hi, we started a YouTube channel about marriage. And it can be awesome, but a lot of times it's like, well, you haven't really walked out a lot of this.
This is not a theory game.
Well, you're still in the honeymoon right now. It's like you haven't really weathered many storms. And so I think one of the things for me, I was very committed to is, if I feel that God's called me to teach, then I need to be the one to learn, so that when I stand up to have something to say, I have something to say. And that's going to take experience.
And also, even when you teach, there's a way that you can teach out of empathy.
Yeah.
I feel where you are. I understand what it is to do a conference and die and be resurrected.
Yes.
I have done it.
Yeah. I know what it's like to be the alto in the back row of the choir for 52 Sundays in a row, and nobody pats you on the back, and you're one of 40 altos. Like, it's easy to be like, why am I even on this choir? Like, it's not like anyone's going to miss me if I'm gone. I understand the reality
I even know how church can be, where people are being rude to each other.
Yeah.
That doesn't give you reason to quit. Or but I understand the empathy is huge in teaching.
And even when I came back from Hillsong, I think there was a part of me that was like, all right, people, I've sung BVs for Darlene. I am the anointed psalmist of the hour. Let me at him. But again, God just knows it's fire that proves gold. It's fire that purifies gold. It's fire that adds value to gold. And so when I came back from Hillsong, I I was offered, I was home for maybe, I can't remember the time. I want to say 6 or 7 months before I was offered a job at Nairobi Lighthouse Church. And the job I was offered was to come on and be the cell group administrator. It had nothing to do with music or worship. I mean, I was on the worship team. I immediately came back and connected to the worship team. I was a small group leader. But again, the need that the church had at that time was for someone to come on and administrate the small groups. And that basically meant enter data. So today, I just sit down on my computer. This week, Rebekah Dawn had 4 people in her cell group. 1 was a visitor, 0 got saved. This week, Richie had 12 people in his cell group. 2 were visitors, 1 got saved. This week, that's what I would do every day, every week, for years. So I was the cell group administrator. Then I was
Okay, first of all, when did you come back? 2004?
I came back 2004.
Okay, so
I
you spent
joined
a year.
staff in 2005. Our church staff in 2005. And then I was our sales administrator, and I was our youth secretary. So I was the youth pastors. We had a bunch of youth pastors. I was just their photocopy this and call that and do this. And that's where I really got involved in, now being involved in like the admin side of things, like Extreme Weekend and stuff like that. So I'm still serving on the team. I had just started now, like leading worship, leading a song here and there.
Are you writing your own music on the side?
Yeah, I had started by then. I mean, nothing
recorded really.
Nothing recorded for sure, and nothing good. I mean, maybe, I'm trying to think. What songs did we do of mine in church at that time? I don't think we did any, to be honest. Like I would show my parents, hey, I've written this song, they'd, oh, that's nice. And we'd move on with life. Again, and I'm so grateful, there just wasn't any, the pastor has written a song, let's do it in church. It's like, well, it's not a very good song yet. I'm still learning. I'm still growing as a songwriter. When I came back from Australia, though, that's also when I reconnected with Kanji. I'd known Kanji from I actually met the Milele guys at Pete Odera's album recording in Grand Regency.